Okay, so the other day we looked at verbs ending in AR. So today we're going to look at verbs that end in ER. And it says los verbos, the verbs, conjugando verbos que terminan con ER, conjugating verbs that end with ER. So let's get started. Okay, now just to review, we are going to talk about infinitives again. We know what the English infinitive is, to plus the verb. And now we should know what a Spanish infinitive is, one that ends in AR, ER, or IR. For example, hablar, comer, o vivir. Hablar, which we studied, ends in AR. Comer, we're going to look at today, ending in ER. And vivir, ending in IR, we will look at in the future. Okay, so conjugating verbs. Hablar, like we looked at before, you have hablar, which you have to get the root of the word in order to conjugate it. So as you can see, as we did before, you go from hablar to habl, and then you add, for example, the o for the first person singular ending. So it becomes hablo español. So we can conjugate verbs and make sentences. Okay. Vivir would turn into viv, but we're not looking at IR verbs today, so let's just take a look at comer. Comer is an ER verb, and as we saw the other day, in order to get the root, you just remove the ER, and that will allow us to conjugate the verb. So, again, before we continue, we should review our subject pronouns: first person, second person, third person, singular, and plural. What I'm going to ask you guys to look at today is to remember that usted is for you formal and ustedes is for you all formal, okay, which is not the same as él or ella, he or she. So in Spanish, remember that we have the informal and the formal. And the usted and the ustedes follows the third person singular. It conjugates the same as él or ella. And if it's the plural, it would be ellos or ellas. And it's the same as that. Okay, so let's conjugate the verb comer, to eat. So, as usual, we have to take the stem. So we have the stem for the verb comer, and it's the same, obviously, for all three people. The yo, the tú, the él, ella, usted form as well. Just like the verb hablar, the verb comer, when conjugated into the first person, ends with the o. So yo como. And tú, if you can think about it, it's actually very similar to the AR conjugation. But because it's ER, instead of ending in AS, this time it ends in ES. Yo como, and then tú comes. And if you can guess, él, ella, or usted come. It's pretty basic. It's very similar to the AR verbs. What we need to remember is that these are regular verbs, so they do follow regular rules. They have similar conjugations, similar endings, which makes them easier to remember and easier to conjugate. The other thing that we need to remember is that all regular ER verbs are going to be conjugated the same as this. However, when we learn irregular verbs, we will see some irregular conjugations. For now, let's focus on the regular conjugations. So, yo como las manzanas. I eat the apples. ¿Tú comes? Las peras. You eat the pears. Él come las uvas. He eats the grapes. So let's move on. So now we'll go from, those were the singular person, we're going to go to the plural person. So yo in the singular goes to nosotros in the plural. Tú becomes vosotros in the plural, and él becomes ellos in the plural. Again, we have the stem for all three in order to conjugate. Now, as we saw with the singular version, the plural versions are going to have a similar conjugation to the AR verbs. Nosotros comemos, vosotros coméis, and ellos comen. Pretty straightforward and pretty basic. Now we can make conjugations and create sentences like comemos el desayuno. We eat breakfast. Coméis el almuerzo. You all eat lunch. Or comen el desayuno. They eat breakfast. So, Now we're going to conjugate the verb comer, and we're going to look at a little problem that I saw in some people's papers from before. So in the negative form, which is the way to say don't or doesn't, we're going to do this in Spanish. So, como las manzanas is the positive form. I eat apples, or I eat the apples. Now, to make it negative, you say, no como las manzanas. But if you want to include the person, the subject pronoun, you actually have to put that in the very front. Yo no como las manzanas. So one of the problems is where to place every piece of this sentence. We know that in order to make this sentence negative, you have to put no in front of como. However, what we didn't see before was the fact that when you have a subject pronoun, that would actually have to go all the way in front. Yo no como las manzanas. Okay? So if we take a look at comes las peras, to make it a negative, you put no in front of the verb. And then, if you want to use the subject pronoun, which we know is not actually necessary, you can say tú no comes las peras. And if we want to do the same thing for the third person, we can go the same way. Okay? So just be careful where you put your subject pronoun and your no and your conjugated verb. So, conjugating ER verbs. The ending will be o, es, and e. Hemos, es, en. If you look back at the worksheet that you did, which you will get back, if you look back at that worksheet, then you will see that these endings are basically the same, but the a has become an e. It makes it pretty easy to remember. Okay, so let's try practicing with the verb comprender, which means to understand. So, yo, if you can get it, go ahead, you can say it out loud, write it, think it in your head. Yo comprendo. Tú, think about it, comprendes. And then él, or ella, or usted, which are not included in this, but they are also possibilities. Comprende. Pretty basic, pretty easy. So, I understand, you understand, and he understands. Comprendo español. I understand Spanish. ¿Comprendes español? O comprende español. Pretty basic, pretty easy. So, looks like I have a little error there. Nosotros comprendemos. Vosotros comprendéis. And if you can't see it there already, ellos comprenden. So I'm going to leave that in there. Okay, so we understand, comprendemos, we understand todo, everything. Nosotros comprendemos todo. If we wanted to make this a negative, we could say, nosotros no comprendemos nada. We don't understand nada, anything. Okay? Vosotros comprendéis todo. You all understand everything. O vosotros no comprendéis nada. Nothing. Okay? So, now you can conjugate ER verbs. So, there is going to be a worksheet that goes along with this. Please complete it. You will have to look up some words. Buscar palabras. Okay? And some verbs on that sheet are going to be AR, and some verbs are going to be ER. Hopefully you can recognize the AR verbs that we've already learned and look for the ER verbs. Most of them are pretty basic. We've already learned some of them in class. Good luck, and I hope you guys do well and it's not too difficult. Please don't spend more than 30 minutes working on this homework. If you don't complete the sheet, if you don't complete the worksheet, that's okay. We will work on it together.